Marvel Zombies is fucking weird. That's it. That's the intro. Comic books and horror films have more in common than you might think. They are cheap to make, considered fringe genres within wider forms of art, and can be divided into distinct ages or eras of influence. We have talked ad nauseum about the ages of comic books, and it turns out the eras of horror films are relatively similar. They're determined by their age, defining influences, individuals that created them, and cultural impact.
I don't like horror comics.
You'll like this one, Mr. Phoenix. It could save your life.
From the late 1800s to around 1920, silent horror films gave audiences an appetite for the spookies. Nosferatu is generally considered the progenitor of horror cinema. Still, if you accept personal recommendations and want to see the Yiddish folktale that inspired the creation of The Thing, we urge you to check out 1920's The Golem. These films offer some downright creepy imagery inspired by German Expressionism, and for our purposes are comparable to the Platinum Age of comics. They're the building blocks of the genre and even medium. While Superman was still on the cusp of creation in the 30s, Frankenstein, Frankenstein's Bride, Dracula, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, and King Kong all helped usher in a golden age of horror films until around the late 40s. Some of these might look quaint today, but had to be terrifying by comparison for contemporary audiences. And here's a fun fact, 1928's The Man Who Laughs inspired some no-name DC Comics character you've never heard of.
Film titled The Man Who Laughs.
It's a story about a kid who had his face slashed into a ghastly smile by rival gypsies. So he grew up into a ghastly-looking character with this white face, this ghastly red lips. That's where I got the Joker from.
Horror comics were among the defining genres of the golden age of comic books. The revolutionary EC Comics Tales from the Crypt features most of the seminal horror creatures you might imagine. Vampires, ghouls, ghosts, werewolves, the Bermuda Triangle, witches, dummies, dolls. And what I'm trying to say is R.L. Stine is a hack who stole all his ideas from the comics he read as a child. The series, of course, introduced the iconic Crypt Keeper. Nonetheless, the goddamn Comics Code Authority censored the medium, and horror comics had the largest target on their back. So those audiences had to go to other places to find their heebie-jeebies.
You like scary movies?
By the time the 50s rolled around, comic books and horror films had shifted tones dramatically. In the latter case, gothic tones were out in favor of sci-fi, doomsday, gimmicky 3D creature features. Incidentally, comics also saw the explosion of the sci-fi genre by introducing characters like The Flash, Adam Strange, the Hulk, or Groot. Yet the 60s feature a general departure from sci-fi horror films, as the psychological and suspense subgenres started bringing audiences closer to the edge of their seat. Filmgoers were introduced to the proto-slasher genre with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Comparatively, the Marvel Comics series Tales of Suspense introduced characters like Iron Man, Hawkeye, Black Widow. Suspense had a loose definition back in the day, okay? However, in the early 70s, the CCA revised its code, and comics were allowed to use classical horror themes. At the same time, the slasher genre was exploding, and horror movies entered a new relative golden age. Everyone is aware of Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, The Shark, Freddy Krueger, the Xenomorph, and of course, the zombie. To qualify, the concept of a zombie is older than almost anything we've talked about so far. Some scholars even believe zombies are as old as the Mesopotamian culture. But more recently, Zumbi dos Palmares was a Brazilian-born slave believed to have descended from the Congo. Zumbi led a slave liberation front across Brazil during the 1600s before meeting a violent end. But to this day, he is honored as a hero for rebelling against colonial powers as a pillar of abolitionism across the New World. Zumbi's life inspired countless folktales. Around the same time, Haitian people subscribed to the Voodoo faith system. In very select voodoo rituals, a corpse could allegedly be revived or possessed through an act of necromancy. The voodoo religion came under much scrutiny during the American occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. Some occupying American troops reported incidents of zombies. During American occupation, the 1932 film The White Zombie first introduced American audiences to the zombie. Decades later, 1953 saw the pre-Marvel Marvel Comics release their zombie. Despite their best efforts, Marvel's title was held hostage to the CCA, meaning it would take another handful of years and innovation before zombies would break into the mainstream. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead saga, starting in 1968, made zombies a household name. However, it did take a few years for the craze to catch on. Having said that, considering classical horror elements were permitted by the CCA in the early 70s, and their first zombie character was from the Golden Age, Marvel Comics trademarked the word zombie. But because the revival of the Golden Age zombie flopped, and knowing how impossible it would be to actually enforce their copyright, Marvel let their copyright on the term lapse. It's fascinating to note that any zombie media produced between 1975 and 1996 technically owed Marvel Comics royalties. In that same time, George Romero produced most of his iconic work, including the best Night of the Living Dead movies. The takeaway from the entire saga is they encapsulate the decade they were made in. Only the first 3 are worth watching. And even if Marvel owned the word, Romero established the zombie as a form of social commentary. Without the work by Romero, we certainly wouldn't have Zombieland, The Walking Dead, Left 4 Dead, or Resident Evil. But Marvel Zombies was probably destined to happen at some point. Now, we know what you've been thinking.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
But it's important to understand what a zombie is to really understand what makes Marvel Zombies the weirdest comic Marvel has ever published. We get it. This is the same company with characters like Dupe, Mandrill, MODOK, and Devil Dinosaur. How can the Marvel Zombies be even weirder than those characters? We've talked in detail about how many of Marvel's most notable characters are directly related to the Fantastic Four. No surprises then that the Marvel Zombies are no different. The Ultimate Marvel Universe was an imprint of the main Marvel Universe that focused on updating many of its most popular characters, like the Ultimates, X-Men, Spider-Man, and of course, the Fantastic Four. Long story short, Ultimate Reed Richards gets an urgent message from alternate reality Reed Richards, so Reed and the team build a teleporter to assist this alternate reality Fantastic Four. Upon arrival, the Ultimate Fantastic Four finds the Earth has been ravaged by zombies and promptly gets the fuck out of Dodge. The concept proved so popular, Marvel went out of their way to get Robert Kirkman to expand on the Marvel Zombies universe. Similar to The Walking Dead, the exact origin of the virus is unknown, but this outbreak is among the more unique zombie plagues, chiefly because it only targets super people, and it leaves them fully in control of their mental and physical faculties, albeit with an insatiable hunger for living flesh facing withdrawal-like symptoms if they don't consume. Meaning most of the main characters are not survivors of the apocalypse, but the zombified superheroes as they cause it. Marvel Zombies starts when a zombie sentry appears on Earth, and an unmitigated onslaught devastates humanity. They are themselves, however this outbreak is presented a lot like an addiction, where the zombies have to eat or go through withdrawals. And if you think shooting a zombie in the head would be hard, now give that zombie sentience, superpowers, and the unadulterated willpower of a crackhead. So yeah, the Earth never stood a chance, and Magneto gets a classic line. Nonetheless, a chance encounter with the Silver Surfer and Galactus ends with the more notable Marvel Zombies feeding on their corpses. Now imbued with the power cosmic, they take to the stars. From there, the plot diverges in a few interesting ways. The Necronomicon pulls Ash to fight some of Marvel's evil dead. Practically every metahuman becomes a zombie. The Marvel apes are there, for some reason. And after some time, Black Panther rebuilds New Wakanda in a decimated New York. In deep space, the Marvel zombies discover that they have, in fact, eaten everyone and everything they could, literally everywhere they could. An argument about morality erupts before Ant-Man is like, yeah, we've been stupid. We should have built a farm. Or better yet, can't we go back to Earth, use our collective tech and knowledge, and travel the multiverse? So they go back to Earth and do just that. If S.H.I.E.L.D. protects Earth, and S.W.O.R.D. protects space, then armor protects reality. All realities. So a zombie outbreak spreading across the multiverse is bad news, and D-list characters Machine Man, Jocasta, and eventually Howard the Duck are sent to stop the outbreak. Most of which turns out to be essentially unnecessary, because the Marvel zombies effectively undo themselves. After eating an entire Earth by himself, Peter Parker simply isn't hungry anymore. Attempting to atone for his actions, he traverses the multiverse to kill his former teammates and muckbangers. His crusade brings him back to Earth, where a new team of Marvel zombies is about to travel the multiverse. Peter Parker sacrifices himself by killing the inflicted Avengers, while a zombified Sentry manages to escape into the multiverse. That is where the Watcher steps in and is like, okay, enough, and sends the Sentry back to Earth as patient zero of the outbreak, more or less locking those afflicted realities in a contained paradox. And for us here at the Comics Quest, that is more or less the end of Marvel Zombies. But that isn't to say they stopped making Marvel Zombies. Deadpool started his own personal, interdimensional outfit, and of course Headpool was a natural candidate. During 2016's Secret Wars, the Marvel Zombies were locked in a constant conflict with an unending army of Ultron drones. The MCU's What If series offers a heavily toned down and altered adaptation that might be worth your time if you are okay with those two massive qualifying statements. More recently, the Marvel Zombies have been resurrected within the comics. To say that barely scratches the surface of the Marvel Zombies universe would probably be an understatement. Personally, nothing has been able to capture the magic of those original few stories. And that's nothing against any talented people who contributed to the series. For now, it seems zombies have more or less run their course. If the death of George Romero, the Walking Dead comics ending, a Daryl Dixon spin-off show, all of us slaying legions of undead who were at times Nazis, and Dead Island 2 being in development hell during the tenure of 3 different US presidents, it might be safe to say zombies need to go away for a little while.
Dad, you killed the zombie Flanders.
He was a zombie?
Leaving Marvel Zombies in a weird spot. Like any noteworthy horror franchise, Marvel Zombies became more and more stupid with each passing entry. But let's quickly talk about what made those original few volumes so special. Maybe it's the zombified classic covers that completely subvert our normally heroic characters into unrelenting monsters. Or maybe it's how Robert Kirkman overturned suspected superhero antics, such as instead of heading home for a morale boost from Aunt May or Mary Jane, Spider-Man just fucking eats them. Marvel Zombies uses superhero framing and iconography, but is executed like a horror movie. And that is something we just don't get enough of. The concept of The Walking Dead seems to be a universal fear or anxiety from almost the dawn of civilization and probably earlier. So what does it mean when superheroes, our newest enduring global icons, become zombies? That is a question no one seems concerned with answering. Marvel Zombies isn't a particularly thoughtful horror story. The plot is nonsense, but the good type of nonsense, that leads to Zombie Hulk thunderclapping Zombie Thanos' head and lapping up the remains. That sentence alone should probably cue you into just how weird Marvel Zombies is. Pop culture credits Marvel with innovating the superhero archetype, but we forget they also help define and normalize what is now an archetype of the horror genre.